She thought it would be just another blind date, a quiet evening to escape the hum of her lonely apartment. But as she sipped her wine, staring across the table at a widower whose eyes seemed to carry the weight of unspoken grief, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. The woman he had mourned for years was walking toward them, smiling, and everything Olivia thought she knew about the night shattered in an instant. Hello, my friends. I am Olivia, and this is Olivia's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I never considered myself unlucky in love, though lately I was beginning to wonder if I was cursed. My life had settled into a rhythm of quiet routines and muted dreams. Early mornings at the office, late nights scrolling through endless dating apps, and weekends spent binging series on my couch, pretending I wasn't yearning for something more. I craved connection, not just fleeting flings or awkward small talk, but a kind of intimacy that would leave my heart thumping, my chest warm, and my soul recognized. It was my best friend, Jenna, who nudged me into this blind date. "You're too picky," she said, her voice the mix of exasperation and love only a lifelong friend can wield. "Just go, Olivia. Give him a chance." So there I was, in a softly lit Italian restaurant, with the faint aroma of garlic and basil swirling around me, a glass of Merlot sweating in my hand, waiting for a man I had never met. The bell above the door jingled, and in he walked. Tall, slightly hunched at the shoulders, like he carried invisible burdens with him. His eyes met mine immediately, and in them I glimpsed something I couldn't quite name. Grief, yes, but also gentleness, a quiet strength that didn't demand attention, only earned it. His name was Daniel. He smiled, and the corners of his eyes crinkled in a way that made me want to reach across the table and trace those lines with my finger, as if touching them might make him feel a little lighter. Conversation flowed, at first cautiously, then with surprising ease. He spoke of his work, of his love for books, and the little things he did to remember his late wife, whom he spoke of with a reverence that was almost sacred. I could feel the tug in my chest, the conflict between wanting to know him and fearing the shadow of his past. The waiter refilled our glasses, and I took a small sip of wine, savoring the warmth as it slid down my throat. The restaurant hummed with quiet chatter and the clinking of cutlery, but in our little corner, time seemed to bend, cocooning us in an intimacy I hadn't expected. I was just beginning to relax, to let myself imagine the possibility of something new, when the door opened again. And there she was. The woman Daniel had mourned for years, standing in the doorway as if the universe itself had conspired to place her there at this very moment. She wore a light blue dress that shimmered under the restaurant lights, and when she smiled, that smile, it was the same one Daniel had described to me in stories that had already painted her as unforgettable. My heart slammed into my ribcage, a wild, panicked rhythm. My fork trembled in my hand. Daniel's eyes widened, frozen in disbelief, and in that instant, I knew the night I thought would be ours alone had just collided with a past I wasn't prepared to face. The room seemed to shrink around me, the hum of conversation fading into a distant, almost unbearable silence. Daniel's mouth opened slightly, then closed, like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure the people at the next table could hear it. I wanted to stand up, run out, hide, anything to escape this surreal collision of past and present, but my legs refused to move. She was looking straight at him, and when their eyes met, the air between them crackled with a mixture of recognition, sorrow, and something I couldn't name. She wasn't a ghost or a memory. She was real, alive, smiling, walking toward our table with a confidence that made my stomach twist. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft but carrying across the small space like a bell, a sound that seemed to reverberate inside me. He swallowed hard. Clara. I clutched my glass tightly, my knuckles whitening. Clara, the woman whose absence had been the shadow in his life, the woman whose stories had been whispered across our awkward first date conversation. I had imagined her many times while listening to him speak, an elegant, ethereal presence haunting the edges of his grief, and now she was here, in front of me. Daniel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the tile floor, the sound jolting me from my stunned state. He stepped toward her, and I felt a pang of something I didn't want to name. Fear, jealousy, maybe betrayal. He reached out, hesitated, and then they hugged. The world tilted on its axis. I wanted to disappear. The floor felt hot beneath my feet, my palms slick with sweat, and yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. I needed to see it, to understand it. She pulled back, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, smiling at him with that same warmth he had spoken about, that same warmth I had thought might one day be mine. Daniel's hands lingered near hers for a heartbeat too long, and then he stepped back, finally turning his gaze toward me. Olivia, his voice faltered. Clara, I said quietly, my own voice barely audible, but it carried the weight of everything I had feared. Clara's eyes softened as she looked at me, and for a moment I saw no malice, just recognition, maybe even understanding. But it didn't stop the tightness in my chest, the sudden dizzying swirl of emotions, confusion, anger, heartbreak, empathy. I realized then that this was bigger than a date gone wrong. This was a collision of timelines, of grief and desire, and complicated pasts, and somehow I was caught in the middle. Daniel opened his mouth, perhaps to explain, perhaps to apologize, but the words stumbled in the air like frightened birds. I could see the torment in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched, the trembling of his hands. He had wanted to move on, to find someone new, and yet here she was, the anchor to his past. The waiter cleared his throat nervously, but no one could focus on him. The restaurant, once filled with soft murmurs and gentle clinking of glasses, had become a stage for something far more intimate, far more raw. And as I sat there, staring at the man I had begun to feel something for, and the woman who had shaped him in ways I could never compete with, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity: nothing would ever be simple again. Daniel finally drew a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to smooth out the knots of his own confusion. Olivia, Clara, this isn't what it looks like, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. But it did look exactly like what it was, a collision of past and present, of loss and longing, and I felt the weight of it settle heavily on my chest. Clara smiled softly, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Daniel, it's been years. I didn't mean to intrude. Her voice trailed, fragile but steady. And in that moment, I realized she hadn't come to disrupt anything. She had come for closure, for understanding. I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of my own presence, my own stake in this chaotic scene. Closure? For him or for you? I asked, the words sharper than I intended, but the sting of betrayal had its own rhythm. Daniel looked at me, guilt and desperation flickering across his face. Olivia, please, he began, but I shook my head. My heart raced, my palms damp. I had felt something genuine for him tonight, a fragile spark I wasn't ready to extinguish. But this changed everything. Clara took a step forward, looking directly at me. I don't want to hurt you. I've moved on, Daniel. and we were happy once, yes, but that was the past. I needed to see him, to say goodbye properly. Her words were soft, almost melodic, but they landed like stones in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to believe her, to trust that I wasn't just a placeholder, a momentary distraction in his grieving heart. Daniel reached for my hand across the table, and I hesitated. My heart wanted to feel his warmth, to let that connection linger, but my mind screamed for caution. Olivia, you have to believe me. She's not what you think. She's not back in my life. I promise you. His voice shook, and I wanted to reach for him, to hold him and tell him it was okay, but I couldn't, not yet. Clara nodded, stepping back gracefully. "I'll leave if it makes things easier," she said, and for a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Daniel's eyes flicked between us, torn, as if the weight of the past and the possibilities of the present were pressing down on him from all sides. I swallowed hard, the wine in my glass now tasting bitter. My chest felt tight, my thoughts a whirlwind of what-ifs. Could I trust him? Could I allow myself to feel again, knowing the shadow of a love long gone still lingered in this room? My need for connection, for warmth, for a future that wasn't colored by grief, wrestled with the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. Then, as if sensing my hesitation, Daniel's hand moved slightly closer, just an inch, bridging the space between us. His eyes locked with mine, raw and unguarded, and for the first time I saw a vulnerability that made my chest ache. "Olivia, I want to try. I really do. But I need you to know the truth. Everything." And in that instant, I realized that tonight wasn't just a date. It was a choice, a crossroads between the ghosts of the past and the possibility of something real, something fragile, but ours. I looked up, and at that moment, the restaurant door opened once more. The door swung open again, and my heart lurched. I half expected another figure from Daniel's past, another twist to this already tangled night. But it wasn't someone new. It was the restaurant manager, politely holding an envelope. Daniel glanced at it, confused, and then back at me, as if silently asking permission. He opened it carefully, unfolding a letter that had clearly been folded for years. His hands trembled as he read the first few lines. I could see the memories flicker across his face. Smiles, laughter, tears, all locked away in the handwriting on that page. Clara watched quietly, her expression soft, compassionate. "It's from my wife," Daniel whispered, voice cracking. "I never received it, until now." His eyes met mine, and in them I saw the full weight of the years he had carried, the grief he had tried to move past, and the vulnerability he had only just allowed me to witness. I realized then that this night wasn't about rivalry or betrayal. It was about honesty, closure, and the courage to open oneself to love again, even after the past had left its mark. Clara's presence had been the bridge to that truth. She nodded once, gently, and then excused herself. "Take care of him, take care of each other," she said softly, leaving without bitterness, without drama, just a quiet acknowledgement that some stories need endings to allow new beginnings. Daniel turned back to me, the letter now folded and held close to his chest. "Olivia, I didn't lie to you. I wanted to be honest about everything. I've loved, I've lost, and now I want to see if we can start something new." My chest tightened. I could feel my heart, fragile and tender, daring to trust again. The room hummed with warmth now, the clinking of glasses, laughter from nearby tables, but it no longer felt intrusive. It felt like life moving forward. Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I want that too, but I need to know you're ready, not just for tonight, but for us." He smiled, that same quiet strength I had noticed on our first glance, and he reached across the table, taking my hand in his. I've been ready, Olivia. I just needed to face my past first, and now that I have, everything feels possible. I squeezed his hand, letting the tension drain away, letting the warmth fill the space between us. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe in something real, not a fleeting moment, not a fantasy, but a beginning built on truth, compassion, and courage. Dinner resumed, but it was different now. The candlelight flickered against our faces, highlighting smiles that were hesitant at first, then bold, then easy. Conversation flowed naturally, laughter came freely, and the shadow of the past no longer felt like a barrier, but a foundation on which something new could grow. And as I looked into Daniel's eyes, I understood that love doesn't erase the past. It embraces it, learns from it, and chooses to move forward anyway. That night, I didn't just meet a man on a blind date. I met someone who had carried loss with grace and who now had the courage to love again. And for the first time in years, I felt my heart whisper, maybe this is the start of something real.